given the kind of work we do more of talking and communicating, than writing code. Because for me, that's like paramount. Because if you don't communicate properly, you can't do well. So we really, really focus on that stuff also. Then also, while you as an Angular developer also, no matter where you're coming from, you have to go through some sort of reorientation, retraining, if you will. Then the company emphasizes stuff on, soft skills, integrity, communication, interpersonal relationships. So those things, we really, really value them, as opposed to even your ability to make a computer do A from B. So that's it.
Okay. So the takeaway is, you do need, hard skills. So like the developer, the designer, the product manager, but also more importantly, you need to have team fit. And you need to have those soft skills that would not cause, friction. Because it's quite funny. I read a Medium article the other day of how, they fired the best person on their team because literally everyone in the organization relied on him. And he was one of those developers that wanted to or liked to lock himself in one room and not be disturbed. And, was writing his, I think you saw it? Yeah, and he was writing in language that nobody else knew, just him. So I think all these skills that you've highlighted, would prove to be good starting points for anyone listening and looking to start Suya Spots. My next question is, we have very interesting developers in Nigeria. Everybody who's, you're in the business of it. You've worked with developers in Nigeria. What challenges should every founder or aspiring founder look forward to having, when hiring and managing a tech team?
I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but I think for me, the one thing that I feel like is missing is critical thinking. And unfortunately, this is something that you get like from an education system. And as anyone knows, Nigerian education system has failed a lot of people. So a lot of people are just relying on informal ways to, get the rights.
He disagrees. It's like he didn't fail him.
No. It didn't fail everyone. But I do feel like there's some really key things that are missing. Specifically with that critical thinking. And, I see this as simple as, let's say I give you a project and there's two choices, right? And a lot of times I see people say, okay, well, my manager said this, so I can only do this. And sometimes there's not even any fight back. Like maybe the developer thinks that's wrong. That's the wrong choice, And a lot of times I just see, some of the developers say, okay, well, my manager told me, so I'll just do it. Instead of just, okay, if you really think that choice is wrong, say something about it. And a lot of times what I do with my developers, and I say, be open. This is an open door policy. I'm transparent with you. I tell you what's going on with the company. And if you feel that, whatever choice or decision I'm making doesn't make sense, then say something back to me. So it's something I've had to really reiterate to get my team to get comfortable in sharing that feedback. And I think it's just a lot to do. I don't really know where it comes from, but I just see a lot of people follow exactly what their manager says, and there's no speaking up or out against, an issue or challenge they foresee. So that's kind of my biggest issue.
I agree with everything Chika said, and it's very critical thinking is very important. One thing we also have put in place at Dev Center is that we are very process driven. So everything there must be a process for how you're doing things. If you start to do things manually and it works like this, figure out the process very quickly. Because and then when we started working with developers, started working with freelancers, we actually noticed that a lot of freelancers don't have that orientation, that process-driven mindset to doing things. But when we started to write documents of this is how we do things, before you work on our project, you have to go and read how we do things, and you have to answer questions and say, okay, based on how you read how we do things, this is what you have gotten from it. This is how our process works. It's how we build sprint by sprint, milestones. So we had to more or less reorientate the developers on how we do things. And that's one thing you always have to figure out very early. It's like, how do I do things? And how can I orientate this girl on how to think? Just, I mean, she's very right. Like there's no critical thinking. It's basically from the educational system. When you see the difference in when you school here and when you school outside the country, you see that like when lecturers teach you, they want to see how you had thought about the process. It's usually case studies and how do you think the case studies? They'll tell you, they'll throw a case study at you. What do you think about this? Why do you think this brand did this? Why do you think this thing did this? And then you answer the case study and you're actually going to think about it. You write essays and it actually shows critical thinking. That's like missing from the educational system. So so when we already know that, I'm like, okay, so how do we then now fix it? So based on more developers that work with us, 2-3 projects, they more or less figured out the process. It's very easy to pick up. Once you take people to like, you allow the brain to do the work. But the brain is like very templated. So once you do things consistently for a long period of time, you just pick it up naturally. So being process driven is very important when you're working with developers in like Nigeria, because if you do things anyhow, you get like anyhow results. So yeah,
founders need to,
be very process driven.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. What about you, Celestine?
Okay, so I feel like, well, Chika and
They flogged it.
they've been attacking the educational sector for like, but I mean, in all fairness, they are not wrong. They're right. Especially in this age and time where people have very fickle time and attention span to things. Process is also a very important thing also. And I think one of the things that has been a bane to us as a society is that we are too fixated on this whole issue of class. So you have this sort of people who assume they're better than this sort of people. And for instance, also, the boss comes in and everybody calls him sa, 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 or ma, 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 ma. The culture it's very important. Set a very flat culture for every single person to be very, very convenient. Now, one of the things that Chika mentioned, I think I have to also say this also. Most people that you see that are sort of headsmen, where they just follow direction, a large part of it has its antecedent from where they're coming from. So they work in an organization where the boss's words are final. You can't challenge it. So it becomes a problem. So over time, their mind is conditioned to always say yes. I mean, at the end of the day, they say, look, if it fails, it fails. What's my own? It's not what you said I should do. So you have to make people very comfortable. I work for an organization where the CEO literally called everyone into a room and said, from this day henceforth, call me my name. It was that bad because everybody just kept calling people sa, 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 sa. And, to a large extent, whether you want to believe this or not, there's a psychological effect that has on people. And when people start thinking that some people are superior, then it becomes a problem. Then process also is a very important thing. Not just for developers in Nigeria. I mean, globally, there are processes to software engineering. Just like every other, I would assume, career has a process. So if you're building a product, for instance, in a normal software company, you have things called stand-ups. Stand-ups are like daily check-ins where team members said what they did the previous day, what they're going to do the current day, and what if they had any issues. The beautiful thing about stand-up is that you can easily poke problems or detect problems very easily before they snowball into this giant issue. So it's very important that you have that. Some companies have what they call playbooks. So a playbook is, this is how we do things, this is how we do things, this is how we do things. And if you follow those steps and methodology, it makes life very easy for every single person, which solves the problem of one developer going to write in a language that he and only himself understand. So that's something.
Yeah, but playbooks, they don't just they don't generate themselves.
Yeah.
Or they do generate themselves, but it takes a while.
Yes, it does.
Right? You need to have gone through this process over and over again, and you must have identified what works and what doesn't work. So having playbooks from the get-go would be, I don't know, wouldn't it be?
No. There's no problem having playbooks from the get-go. Like I said, things have fundamental principles. So for instance, a hydraulic engine will always need oil to function effectively. No matter what you do, you can't put oil in a hydraulic engine. So those are like principles, that things you have to do. So yes, playbooks also morph into the organizational culture, where an organization has a way of doing things. There are companies or there are maybe organizations that have nonchalant attitude towards something. So you're running a company, a client calls, and somebody over the phone is signed. I mean, it could stem from the top, and it sort of seeps into everything. But when the boss says, look, when a client calls, drop every single thing and focus on this client and solve that problem, and they sort of put their foot on the ground, then everybody knows that's how things ought to be done, and that can be incorporated into the company playbook. So that's it.
Okay, great. So when we started, I said we're going to talk on three things. One, building an MVP. Two, building your tech team. So now, as a technical founder or co-founder, what can you contribute? Because a lot of people tend to focus on tech too much and leave out the rest of the things. So what can you do? Are there certain skills that these non-technical founders should exude, or what do you think they can contribute to make it easier or to make everything work for everyone?
So the skills where the non-technical co-founders can bring or the technical co-founders can bring, which one?
Non-technical.
Okay, so I think the non-technical founders, to be fair to them, they do a whole lot. Yeah, I mean, I haven't run a business before, but all through my career I have worked in startups, and those things have loads and loads of challenges, especially if you're running a company in Nigeria, for instance. So imagine you show up one day, Lagos State Property Authority has a sticker on your door and nobody can access the building and there's work to be done. I mean, we should give them credit if they're doing that. I would rather speak to the fact that non-technical co-founders should look for founders who are more business oriented. So you're not just about writing software. You understand the implication of what the software is going to do to the business. For instance, if you ask people that work in the payment industry, for instance, of course, you and I know that the difference between 10 naira and 100 naira is 0. So if this person, while in the heat of writing software, doesn't really pay attention to the extra 0, that in itself can bankrupt your company. So they have to understand that this software that you're writing have actual business implication. One mistake can either send everybody back home or can just take us stratosphere. So that's something they should focus on.
Well, what's your take on this?
So for me, I think the non-technical person should have a very good business development skills. So for example, most of my time is spent really through forming partnerships that we use for our company. And I think that's, really key. As well, it could be marketing, it could be operations, it could be finance. I think there's so many, different skills that are needed, and I don't even think it's in one person. A lot of times, for example, I have someone I actually brought in, to help us run our operations and finance, and he was actually an initial first investor. So I think it's really, looking at, okay, we have this technical team ready to go. What are the other components that are going to be successful for my startup to run? And I think, during your life cycle, as you're running a company, it comes in different phases. So, for example, it could just be, I just need someone who's amazing at sales and can get sales, in the door. And then as you grow, it's, okay, I need someone who will help with the full operations, the finances. We're not talking to investors or expecting financial models or expecting, all these numbers. So I just really think it's about really planning out at each stage of your startup what is key and what team members are key while you're building it.
Do you also think that it's important for this non-technical founder to be an industry expert? I mean, like we've mentioned, both of you say you would need to juggle and learn and be jack of many trades. But do you think, in your experience as HR and running companies, do you think it's important for the non-technical founder to be an industry expert, at least for you, HR?
I think also depends on the startup. I think eventually you should become one. So, if you have this idea, but that wasn't really industry, you need to actually take time. And this could be through an advisory team, a board of advisors that can come in as the industry experts to really help you, understand the industry you're playing in. But I do believe for certain companies, so for mine, for example, it's actually helpful because sometimes on the product, it was built a certain way and then we realize, okay, but as an HR person, as I'm going through, playing around with the product, that's actually not how I would see it. And so sometimes it also helps to have an industry expert to help build the product as well, because they're seeing it, they could be a potential user of the product, and they're able to kind of help see maybe some places that the technical team wouldn't see.
I think you haven't told us enough what Talent Base does, so I think you should tell everyone what your company does. I think we pretty much know what Dev Center and Andela does by this time.
So we are an HR software. We primarily work with SMEs. So basically, you have a team, and you're ready to pay your staff every month, we help with payroll. Different things like staff records, leave management. So when your team is saying, you know, I'm sick, you know, calling sick for the day, or I want to plan my vacation, we basically help companies automate all those HR processes so they can actually focus on their business.
So is that a fee? Because your website says request for a quote.
Yes, yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah, there is a fee. We basically charge per 10 employees and then go from there, just depending on how robust of an HR system you need. Some people just say, I just need staff records and payroll. We have slightly bigger companies that need the full suite. So it really just depends on the company. But we do work with companies that have less than 10 employees. So yeah, it is definitely affordable.
Is there any plan in the future to say build your team? Because that's part of HR, right? Is that something that would be or can be automated in the future into talent base?
Coming soon.
It's coming soon? Okay. So, all right. So from each one of you, what's the one takeaway you want everyone in this room to go with? If, you know, if you're a non-technical founder and you're trying to start up something, what's the one takeaway, one advice, one recommendation, whatever it is?
For me, I think what has been key is being in the ecosystem. You know, I don't have this idea in my head and I'm just thinking about it and I say, oh, I need to find people. I've actually seen that, you know, me being in part of Facebook groups, me going to certain events, getting familiar with, you know, different people. It's actually easier for me now. If I have a new idea, I actually know people I can go to who have the technical talent that I need to build out a new product. So I definitely think just being in the ecosystem is really helpful because, like I said, it's a marriage. It's beyond just, okay, this guy can code, he's brilliant, you know, but it's also about thinking, can we be a partner? You know, do we think the same? Do we align the same? Do our visions our visions, you know, interwoven into what we're trying to do. So I really think it's important to get to know the person, and through that is through these, you know, these ecosystem events.
What about you?
Okay, well, that's very important, being in the ecosystem. Secondly, I think I'll approach it from my own story. I have a first degree in accounting. My BS is in accounting, and I moved over to marketing. I worked in advertising, and now I'm in tech. And I've built over like 50 software projects.
Have you written a line of code?
I have not written a line of code.
And you're a product manager?
And I understand how the tech works.
Interesting.
So I have not written a line. I don't
Can
know
you
how
tell
to write
us
a line
how
of
you
code.
did it?
My advice, like non-technical founders, I guess is, I mean, you can do it. I mean, you can actually build a tech business without being a technical founder. You can actually just have to be ready to do a lot of things, a lot of more things than what you would do if you're a technical founder. You have to be able to understand the product, understand business, understand everything, and just go out all out there. So
well, how do you get to understand it? Because you've done it, and you know, what is there any like playbook you can give us?
We're talking about the playbook. My co-founders tell me, like Sean tell me that, you know, everything you're looking for is online. Like, check and research and learn. Like, everything you're looking for. Like, the guys that have done it before you and the guys that have that made the same mistakes. So, I mean, you don't have to make the same mistakes. You have, like, a group of advisors. You have, like, can literally stand on the shoulders of giants and literally know. Even though you are a technical founder, you still need to stand. You need to sit on the shoulders of giants and learn how people, so you don't make the same mistakes. So, I mean, research and know how these things work. And that's what a lot of what I have done. I have, you know, read like a lot of like how these things work. And like, okay, can I try this today? Okay, it works. Hey, yeah. Can I try this tomorrow? So it's literally the life of a founder. Like, looking like a founder, you try stuff, it works. Good. You try stuff, it doesn't work. You learn and you improve the process every single time. You should be willing to always experiment and know that, okay, I'm going to get better and better and better. So I mean, I guess
so
my
never
own
stop
advice
learning.
is, what? Yes, sorry?
Never stop learning.
Yeah, never stop learning. So I
and
never
Google
stop learning.
is free.
Yeah, what?
Google is free.
Yeah, Google. Google is definitely, nobody's charging you for Google yet. So Google is free for now. So So yeah.
What about you, Clement?
So I think for non-technical co-founders, one of the things I would say is that don't see your engineering team as mercenaries. Always think about them first as human before thinking about them like these people that produce awesome software. Because when you do that, you sort of empathize with them very well and understand how things are being done. Because oftentimes when we see really good solutions out there, there's a whole lot of things that happen behind the scene to make it look very smooth and near intuitive for you to use. So think about it this way. Second thing also, as much as you can, be very open about the business, because I think one of the mistakes I have seen is that most non-technical co-founders, like I said, it goes back to seeing people as mercenaries. Feel, oh, this guy just writes software, he doesn't understand what the business is all about, so there's no point bothering him. Please, as much as you can, let the people know. If your burn rate is going to take you not more than 3 months, please tell them in advance also. It's not to scare people, but just let people know that this is how things are. Because when you do that, that's one of those critical moments where you know who is with you for the long haul or who is just with you for selfish interest. Secondly, also, do a very good job of always reminding people like the big picture, because I mean, things will happen in the company and people might lose faith, but it's your job to continue to remind people this is why we're here, and just carry people along and treat people fairly as humans also. And if possible, please give out equity. It helps.
Yes, give out equity, yes.
Thank you all so much. This has been a fun panel. Can we give them a round of applause, please? So now it's time to Q&A. Do we have any questions in the audience? Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Jami Shibajo. I work as the project manager for Doing So Well. Not technical, but now in technical. So I have two questions. Both are the same in an aspect. I want to know how you were able to make your team imbibe the DevOps culture and the agile methodology that you use. I actually want Clement to answer the question, and I don't know your name, but you. Thank you.
Okay, so first question, how are you able to make people imbibe the DevOps culture? So think about this way. I think for me, it goes back to telling people stories. Computers have a mind of their own. The day you want them to work, that's the day they decide to die. And your ability or inability to recover very quickly could spell either success or doom to your companies. Always keep at the back of your mind that machines will die. Nobody's fault, so you have to always remind people about that. Now, when you remind people about that, it helps them think about how to automate boring processes. Because think about it. If you're running a high availability system, sorry, if I'm going tech speak now. So if you're running
Please a bunch of, like an 8-year-old.
Okay, if you're running a bunch of machines that have 5 systems in front of them, every single time you have a new software update, that means you have to go do manually on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, imagine a day and time will come when you have 200 machines. That means whenever you want to release software, you have to do it 200 times. And there is nothing stopping you from being error-prone. Errors will always come out. So when you let people know that, then people will find a way to sort of, what's it called now, automate things. And in the course of automating those things, people will plan for those things. Now, I used to work at Conga. Now, we used to run a company called Rackspace, our cloud hosting providers. One day, they sent an email that they would do routine maintenance, and in the course of doing routine maintenance, they lost power in the data center. That means the company went offline. No fault of ours. But because of the fact that we've already had this DevOps culture at the back of our mind, we're able to recover very quickly. So it's a question of moving what you already have here to another data center and switching all of the traffic to that place, and life is good. The second question is the agile culture. Now, we're in an era where you don't go to build software for 10 months, then come back with a product, and lump it on consumers, and you feel every single thing will go well. It's not going to work that way. Now, with an institution where one company launches a product A or feature A in the morning, by that same evening, another company is launching the same features. Take, for instance, what is happening between Facebook and Snapchat. Snapchat started stories. Facebook today has stories in almost all their products. Now, Snapchat, I would assume they're playing catch-up, and while Facebook is also running very quickly in those things. So if people don't understand the value of Agile, then there's a problem, because your business model will change continuously. And Agile sort of lends itself to business models. As the business model changes, you also have to react very quickly. So that's something you have to make people understand, that if we don't react very quickly, we might all as well go back to our mother's houses and just start living there. So that's it.
Next question.
Okay, cool. Okay, so-
Thank you. My name is David Abulu. I have two questions. One for the man from Andela and one for the lady. Well, you said for Andela you could work with your partners for the whole time. Or, I want to know, for that whole time doesn't mean that the team that you've assigned to the company will be at your Andela facility, or it will be there for some time and then we'll move back to the partner's location and work there. That's the question for Andela.
Sorry, I don't really understand that question.
You were asked about the time frame of your agreement with your partners. Then you said you hope that it could be for a lifetime.
Yeah?
So my question is, the team that Andela were assigned to the partner, assuming I want to sign up with Andela to have developers from Andela. I'm saying, you said that agreement could be for a lifetime. So my question is, for that lifetime, will the team members be at your facility, or they will only be at your facility for some time and then you will transfer them to my location?
No. I mean, in as much as you're extending your engineering team, they'll always remain under our staff. So we don't necessarily transfer people to your location. But one of the things that we do as part of an immersive process is that for every single partner that signs up with Andela, we also let you understand that at some point, the team that you have created here at Andela will from time to time come over to your facilities and work from there. So we have people, go to partner location for like a month, 2 months, go work from there and come back here. And the reason why we do that is because there's a difference between when I know you as Mr. A and I can relate with you as Mr. A and I can send you something and we can talk about it, than when I just know you from your Slack avatar or your Skype avatar. The interpersonal relationship isn't that strong. So we always send engineers to partner location to go work from there for a while.
Okay, my next question, about your company and your product. When I sign up, is there a free demo, maybe for 1 month?
So we do a demo. So my sales team would actually first ask you what do you need, kind of go through your actual HR concerns, and then we do a demo of the product, and that is a chance for you to figure out what modules you want. So we have done free trial in the past, and what we realize is these companies are not ready for the system. So it's just easier to say, look, once you're ready, you make a payment and you can sign monthly or annually. But what we've seen in the past is we've done the free trial thing in Nigeria. I just haven't seen it pick up well, just because a lot of people end up wasting your time. So it's just best for us to do just a free demo of the actual product, but not a trial.
Unfortunately, we may have to close the Q&A right now because we're crunching time. But thank you all so much. And can we give a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you.
because I guess some people are not in this class, but just lounging here. So the next class is very important. This next class is about understanding investment instruments, understanding convertible notes. So sometimes you meet investors and they tell you that we're gonna give you this on a convertible note, or you're gonna raise money on equity or safe notes. And the people that will be handling these topics, they're the two ladies that I really respect in terms of that. The front so that they can engage with you instead of at the back. And if you want to talk, you want to move outside as well. The other thing I want to say is that there are other classes taking place at the other buildings. So if you want to go to those classes as well, there are a few things that we're discussing there. So if you want to join that class, that would be cool as well. So I'm going to invite to the stage Fola Kafidia, okay, from JEE Client Services. And you want the mics, okay. They're going to mark you. And Odunoluwa Longe from Longe Practice and DIY Law to join this panel. Can we give them a hand as they're coming to the stage, please?
Hi.
Do we have anyone
Okay, this
here?
is so cold. Hello. Okay, thank you. Please make this easy for us.
I know. I think it's because we're women in a men's
I know,
space.
right?
No, right?
So my name is Odun, as Dotto introduced, and here's Fola. So I'll let Fola speak a bit about herself, and then I'll tell you what I do too. Okay.
Yes, so I'm Fola Kafide, okay, and I'm the service principal at JE Client Services, and we describe ourselves as business support and governance professionals. We tend to deal with governance issues for businesses in any life cycle, and a lot of people run away from us because we tell them no a lot to what they do and tell them how to do it better.
So my name is Odun, as I said, and I work with the Lunga Practice and DIY Law. Lunga Practice is an entrepreneur-focused law firm. We work with entrepreneurs, we work with early-stage investors and venture-backed investors. DIY Law is an online technology platform. So today we're talking about legal instruments, investing legal instruments, the kind of legal instruments that you use or you see when you're raising funds. I know a lot of you have heard, when those of you who've had discussions with investors, like, we want to conduct a due diligence. And then the next thing is, I'm sending you a term sheet. And there are going to be definitive agreements. And I know that most times, it sounds like Greek to a couple of people. So we're going to be talking about this. Then we'll also talk about the implication. What happens after you've signed these documents? What happens when you sign these documents? What implication does it have on your company, on your books, on your, on your legal framework? We want to make this as flexible as possible, so we're open to having questions even as we talk. So if we're using some legal jargons, which kind of happens when lawyers are speaking, please just raise your hand and we'll try to speak English. Okay. All right then. So maybe let's start from the first stage. Before the documents come out, you have a process, a due diligence process. And I'm going to let Fola speak on this, as that's our expertise. So what exactly is due diligence? And for legal due diligence, what are they looking for?
As in, I would like to point out an interesting fact that IFC pointed out the other week. I was in an event where they were, and they said for every business, startup, SME, the key challenges they have are access to capital, access to markets, and access to expertise. In some ways, where the expertise you would look for when you're trying to get your startup, functioning right and scaling up, and then we help you determine how to access your capital. And in some ways, when you've already decided what type of capital you want to access, the other party will be looking to conduct some due diligence. But it's also key that you conduct due diligence as well. You can't follow every money. You've got to decide which money is right for you, and how you determine that is the due diligence. So a few questions you possibly will ask is, what's the best financing model that reduces a burden on my business and doesn't also kill me going forward trying to comply with the standards required? I think that's a key question to ask your lawyer. And your lawyer will then break down the financing models available and tell you which ones you can keep up with and which ones are actually outside of your structure process. A few other questions would be, how do I pay back? How do I maintain records of this transaction going forward? Record keeping is quite key. How do I get an accountant that understands my financing structure so that seal this deal, I can actually have clear financial records that show this transaction. I think those are a few that come to my mind.
Yeah, and also from an investor point of view, what will the investor be looking for, in a legal due diligence?
I think I've been here since yesterday, and the key thing that has been reiterated over and over again from an investor point of view is that your structures have to be clear, your internal structures. We talk about who is the management, who is your board if you're an incorporated entity. If you're still a business name, I think you need to know that you need to move away from a business name and become an incorporated entity. They would also want to find out who controls the company. So I need to make it clear that just because you have a board of directors and there's a shareholder, who controls the company is quite key for investors to know, because that person is ultimately the person that turns things bad or good in every organization. They tend to want to know if your records are up to date. So accurate records. Those are some of the things I think.
Yeah. And in addition, you have issues like they want to know, what are your employment letters?
Right.
Do you have employment letters? Are your employees, what kind of contracts do you have with your employees? Are they full employees? Are you sticking with the provisions of the law? Then, what's your IP framework like? Has your IP been assigned? Does the company own the IP, or does the IP still reside in the individuals? So these are the things that investors are looking for when they're conducting a legal due diligence on you. They want to know what the shareholding is. Are there any ghost shareholders?
Right.
Or is there an imbalance among the founders? Is there founders' agreement?
Yes. Or shareholder agreement.
Or shareholder agreement. So these are the things that your investor wants to see in the due diligence. Now, sometimes simultaneously with the due diligence or after the due diligence, sometimes before, a term sheet is then signed. Now, what is that term sheet? The term sheet basically stipulates, okay, these are the commercial terms of this relationship. It is non-binding. Most term sheets are non-binding, meaning that we can walk away from this if things don't go our way. You'll typically find a line in most term sheets that says that this, concluding this transaction is subject to adequate legal and financial due diligence. Yeah. So the fact that you signed a term sheet is not a guarantee that an investment will be concluded, but it's the beginning of discussions. This is also negotiated in good faith. That doesn't mean you shouldn't negotiate your term sheet in good faith, because what is agreed on in the term sheet, it's assumed that is what will be moved. It will be developed further in the substantive agreements. There are two main investment instruments for startups, and then there are new ones we're beginning to see. So it's either you're raising debts or you're raising equity. But then we see the hybrids that have been imported from Silicon Valley. We see things like the SAFE and the KISS. But the two most popular, the SAFE means simple agreement for future equity, and the KISS means keep it simple security. And we'll talk more on this later. But the most popular is a debt, equity, or the hybrid, which is the convertible note or the convertible loan. So the equity investment, you're signing two main agreements. One is the shareholders agreement, and the second is either a share subscription agreement or a share purchase agreement, depending on who the shares are being bought from. So if the shares are being bought from the company, you're signing a share subscription agreement. But if they're being bought from the founders or other shareholders, you're signing a share purchase agreement. The terms are very similar. The share subscription agreement or the share purchase agreement is a very simple agreement. Basically, this is the money the investor is bringing, and this is how many shares he's getting.
Right.
It's nothing beyond that. Okay, you can have some warranties that, yes, the company is saying, the founders and the company are warranting that the company is in good standing, the company is allowed to take this loan, is duly authorized to take the investment. But a very simple agreement. The shareholders agreement is where it gets a bit more complicated depending on the parties involved and the amounts involved. So you're looking at, there are two things you should always watch out for an equity investment, or most investments. It's the economics and the control.
Right.
So economics, and every other thing is not worth arguing over, I tell you the truth. But look out for the economics and the control. So the economics is, how much shares am I giving out? What's the valuation of my company? It is, what is the liquidation preference? And I'll talk more on liquidation preference because that tends to confuse a lot of people. Is there dividend distribution? Is there profit distribution? Is this fair? So those are the things you want to look out for in the economics of your term sheet, of your equity participation. Control is how many board seats? Who's getting a board seat?
Can you terminate a director without me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can you terminate a director? Are there things called reserved matters?
Right.
Meaning, if this person doesn't consent, we cannot do it. What are these reserved matters? Are they things I'm willing to leave as reserved matters? Are they things that I'm ready for the investor to have a final say?
Yeah.
Now, those are the things you really want to negotiate and make sure that they are balanced. Now, as a startup, you also want to recognize that the investor is bringing in some money, and he needs to protect his funds. Protecting your funds will mean that you need to put certain checks and balances in the instruments, and that's why you have reserved matters. So a fair agreement is a balanced agreement.
Manage it. If you just put your own personal money into the company and it's not a loan, you're probably just going to think it's a sunk investment, and you're going to mismanage it thinking, I put it in. But if you put it in as a loan, you start thinking like an investor yourself. And any other investor that comes in will then think, okay, there's already debt in the company. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? So, there's a pro and there's a con.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
And for the loan agreement, as I said, it's a simple agreement. All you say is, how much is the loan? What's the interest rate? How long? That's basically what your loan instrument is.
But I have a recent consideration that has come up in some of the businesses I speak to. Sometimes when there's a loan to the company, for example, the loan agreement has to be, so in foreign jurisdictions, if you put in a loan agreement, it cannot be a short-term loan, so it cannot be shorter than 7 years because it does look bad on your balance sheet. However, we don't have those legal considerations in Nigeria, so it's a commercial consideration. That do you want the loan to be a short-term loan or a long-term loan, because it has different implications on the balance sheet. The other point that has come up that I've seen recently in conversations is if you're repaying, generally a loan agreement would say you would repay the interest every year at the end of the year on an annual basis, or you will compound it. However, we all know that as a startup, your first 3 years are key for you in trying to make money back. So do you want a loan that you have to repay in the first year where you know you're not making any profit to repay? So the clause of the repayment clause is quite key, because you need to think about the reality of the business and how you would repay that loan, and have your lawyer draft it in a way that will actually be realistic for the business you're dealing with.
Okay. So talking about the convertible note now. We'll move on to the convertible note. The convertible note is a hybrid instrument. It comes in as a debt. It comes in as a loan. But the intention is to convert this to equity. And in the startup world, why many people use the convertible note is so that we can defer that valuation conversation. So we're looking at, you're just starting. Today's, you want to get financing, say, at ideation, or you just have your MVP. You haven't really done much. Pre-revenue. How do you even value such an entity? How do you value such a business? So that conversation kind of, it becomes a bit difficult. So the investor says, okay, I believe in your idea. I want to fund this, but your books can't take it. And says, I'm going to give this as a loan. But when so happens, it's either going to be tied to an event or a period. So maybe when you raise up to $500,000, or when you raise up to $100,000, or within a period of 2 years, it's usually an either-or case in most convertible notes. They put both there. So it's either for your loan, your convertible note is for a period of 2 years, or when you raise up to X amount, my loan then converts to equity. Now, what does the equity at the valuation you're raising at that time? The question for the investor who's coming in at that time then is, what is the advantage I get for coming in when there's nothing? I can't be, the price of the shares I'll be converting into cannot be valued at the same value as an equity investor who's coming after you've made some money, who's seen some of the prospects of the business. I'm coming in earlier. So that's where you start discussing things like discounts and interest. So an interest is like a loan. You put an interest on it. For convertible notes, the interests typically are not as high as you will find in regular loans. It's a bit lower. And then a discount is a discount on the price of the share. So if your equity investor who's coming 3 years' time is buying your shares at, say, $1 per share, I want a 20% discount. I'm going to be paying, my shares will be at 0.80 cents. It's going to be 80 cents. So it's not going to be up to $1. Or if we say 100 naira, they're buying 100 naira a share. I'm going to be buying at 80 naira a share. That's basically what a discount means. So those are the terms you also want to negotiate, that you typically discuss between the investor and the founder when you're negotiating convertible notes.
You're right. Convertible loans are essentially a situation where you can't go. In foreign jurisdictions, the valuation is an Excel sheet, a financial model. You enter all the figures, everyone gets you get a fee, it bumps out a figure at the end, and we know what the value of the business is. But we're not quite there yet in Nigeria where valuations happen like that. So you've got to think of financial instruments that don't force you to go spend money with an analyst somewhere who will charge you thousands of dollars to get a valuation done because you don't want to do it. You just defer the issue to the future and say, between us, you're loaning me this amount of money on these terms, which your lawyer will help you negotiate, and at the future event, or the earliest or the latter of a future event, you hand them a number of shares. Obviously, this leads to a few points in governance that I would talk about with a client who is doing this. I would then be saying, how do you record, this charge in some ways in your organization on your financial record, so that anyone coming into the business knows that there's a first investor in there. It's times like this that registers of the company are quite important, because even though you're not required to make this a charge in the register of charges of the company, it's one of those places where you can keep a record that there's someone who is entitled to certain shares in the company, and those shares are up for grabs at a certain time. I also say these are the times where you have to have a board meeting to actually agree to enter into a convertible note, because the minutes of the board will be the records that a future investor will see that you've had a conversation and you've passed resolutions to give someone shares in the future.
You want to talk more about what registers are?
Right. So I think it's a pet peeve for someone like me who does governance when I say how many startups have at least the 5 registers they are required by law to keep the moment they incorporate a business. And I find very often that few people even have 1 register, not to talk of the 5 registers that they are required by law to keep. So these registers are registers that we refer to as statutory registers. You're supposed to have a register of directors and secretary. You're supposed to have a register of shareholders, a register of charges, a register of directors' interest. I could go on and on. But these registers are statutory registers. You're required to have a record and available for inspection the moment you have an incorporated entity. But when you deal with convertible loans and safes, the registers are not the appropriate places to keep the record. So your board minutes are quite important for every time you make decisions, investment decisions of this nature, the record of an investment decision.
Okay, so we'll talk about, she's mentioned SAFE, so that brings us into the SAFE. So what is SAFE? The SAFE was, it's an instrument that was started by Y Combinator, and we're beginning to see a few startups here in Nigeria in Africa use the SAFE. Now the SAFE, as I said, means simple agreement for future equity. It is not a loan, neither is it shares. So what is it?